Hello everyone, welcome to God's Grace on Thee. Today is Friday, yay, it's the 18th of April of 2025. It is now 3:15 p.m. So it is now approximately 3:15 p.m. here in Reno, Nevada. So today we want to get back into the chapter on the Phoenix Journals, and it is called The End of the Masquerade, Let's Pluck the Cuckoo Bird. And we're going to skip over chapter 3 because it talks about people that they're dealing with, so it's not really necessary for us. But I want to start again with chapter 4. So let's get started, and I welcome all my new members, and I hope that you jump right in. And you're probably wondering what we're talking about, but if you go back in time into my videos and go back to the very first, and you'll figure out and listen to the journey that we've been going on. And it's quite exciting. And out comes a lot of truth. And everything that's stated can be verified by, just researching. So let's get started. And this is chapter 4. And it's recording number 1, Hatton. Saturday, April the 20th of 1991. 9:07 a.m. Year 4, Day 247. Dharma. Allow us to move right along this day, for there is much to be done away from this place. And I need not remind you to watch Baker, need I? And if you don't note him in Israel, Khazar, making final plans for your downfall, then it would do no good for me to mention it. And meanwhile, there is so much to attend, i.e., please note that George Bush's pet Inter-American Development Bank, the IADB, has suspended a $350 million loan to Brazil, which was destined to finance sewage infrastructure in the country's worst slums. Now, this is totally a pressure tactic to force the government to allocate more in foreign debt repayments. And the genocidal consequences of Bush's service to the international banks might make his favorite references, Hitler, look like St. Francis, who at least loved the animal. The IADB's own representatives in Brazil described the funds as urgently needed, and they're now suspended during a cholera epidemic, which will devastate Brazil and other nations as well. Now, cholera bacillus, which is now ravaging Brazil's neighbor of Peru and spreading into Ecuador and Colombia, is water waste borne. It will establish a foothold in the very areas which have waited in vain for promised sewage and water treatment facilities. Now, this is exactly that which was planned when the cholera was introduced in order to bring the South American countries to their knees. Now, doesn't anyone notice that after every state visit from American plagues break out? Now, the Brazilian Foreign Ministry issues a protest calling the bank actions both unacceptable and illegal. And do you think that it matters whether or not it is illegal? It simply goes with the hole in the head instead of the ozone layer. Fear tactics, which kill, by the way. Now, the experts lie to you. Just as well they tell you the rainbow strobing lights from our craft are ice crystals, refracting light from the star behind, and you will accept it with accolades and push to get the telescopes out there to see it better. Why? Your Hubble telescope sits at White Sands, but they get you ready for the worst, which they will then pull down on you right on schedule and with the predetermined symptoms and death scenario as predicted. Ozone? If ozone is so confounded life-saving for you ones, then explain to me why you have smog alerts over the production of ozone. Wouldn't it be more reasonable that if there is ozone protecting you in your stratosphere, that the ozone produced would seek its way to its source and plug up the hole? And where do these stupid facts come from? NASA? The same NASA, by the way, that has lied to you about every space shuttle launch you have had. And funny thing about this ozone fact-finding board, there are no documents upon which to base such claims. NASA, in fact, says there's no report that actually documents any of these claims. And not only that, but the data that claims an ozone depletion of as much as 6 to 8% per decade have not even been peer reviewed. So that means that not only is there no written scientific evidence to back up these claims, but the data themselves have not even been submitted to competent scientists for examination. And this is an outrage to your intelligence. It is a raw act of terrorism through which to totally control you and your actions, products, and freedoms. Now, I like one projector's opinion of the situation, and this announcement came from NASA's Robert Watson, who has acquired a reputation among respected scientists as being an errant hoarder. Now, holes in the ozone layer, it's far more likely and far easier to document scientifically that there's a hole in Robert Watson's head. And another in the head of William Riley, the similarly obsessed chieftain of the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, the facts are, friends, that there has been a decrease in ultraviolet radiation of over 7%, exactly the opposite of what the ozone depletion theory predicts. So, dear ones, to make accurate correlations, you would have to measure at least 16% greater levels of UV today. And you're measuring 7 to 12% lower than when the thing began in 1974. So you're being duped. Now, labor of the slave variety. Let us speak of labor recycling, which is a policy before the New York State Legislature at present, which would introduce into the United States the policy of such labor recycling. Now, this became quite notorious under the Nazi economics minister Hjalmar Schacht as the slave labor camp system. Now, this conveniently comes as reports are showing that unemployment claims nationally had reached a staggering 8-year high of some 550,000 for the ending of March. Now, know that those are only the official statistics, notoriously understated, for those unemployment benefits have run out, and there's no other way to measure the unemployment levels. So the real unemployment in the United States reaches into the tens of millions, but even the Bureau of Labor and Statistics officially figures have scarcely been reported in most U.S. press. Now, the New York Project for Slave Labor is part and parcel of George Bush's economic program for the United States, under which he has foisted costs of government off on states and localities and called it federal budget deficit reduction. So you see, it would be fine if the government ran according to the Constitution and the federal government didn't steal all of the money from the states, which would take care of its local problems. Now that, coupled with Bush's zero growth, oh yeah, there's such a plan, free trade fanaticism and such, translates into the death of American industry and savage austerity against Americans. And it has everything to do with the state and local government budgets crisis that's now erupting across the country. Okay, so now let's look at how this works. Really good on the surface, so be careful at how you analyze the next information. Now, under this plan, an employer in New York City hiring the welfare recipients would be paid $318 a month. 90% of the $353, that monthly check, home relief recipients now receive. Now, the employer would then be required to put out his own pocket only an additional $326 per month to meet the monthly minimum wage equivalent for a 40-hour week of $680. Now, the plan would be mandatory for all employable home relief recipients who have stayed on the welfare rolls for 6 months without finding work. Now, most of the state's $315,000 home relief recipients have physically or psychologically disabilities or drug dependencies, which classify them as unemployable. And 115,000 people, equivalent to the labor force of a medium-sized city, are categorized as employable and would be the targets of this plan. So as the state fiscal year opens, 30 states are facing intractable deficit problems, including the two largest, which are California and New York. Now, this crisis hits education and public sector employment in general and will soon fuel another massive wave of layoffs. And this Bush policy bails out the banks and it lets the localities collapse. In the current climate of skyrocketing nationwide unemployment and declining wages, the plan would be an incentive to employers of unskilled labor to fire current employees and hire the welfare recipients at roughly half the net cost. Then after a year, when the state subsidy runs out, the employers could dump those workers and rehire the desperate former employees of their own or other concerns at much reduced wages. Now, wage reduction schemes such as these, known as labor recycling, were carried out in Brazil in the 1970s under advice from the U.S. and International Monetary Fund economists, where they greatly increased the immiseration of especially low-wage working families. And they're now planned for nearly liberated Eastern European nations, including Hungary and eastern part of Germany and the others, if the Bush administration's free enterprise cultists get their plans followed. Now, this same scheme made its appearance in the United States beginning in the 1970s under Nixon's Phase 1 and 2 austerity programs. Now, you see, it does nothing to get people off of welfare, but rather cements them more surely into the rotten system. Initially, the plan had the support of the AFL-CIO and a liberal Democratic coalition in Congress, but a coalition of welfare recipients, unemployed, and labor held off at least the worst aspects of such efforts through public exposure of the true intent to investigate the purely Nazi plan. Economics for the Ford, Carter, Reagan, and Bush administrations led to a steady erosion of real wages. And the average take-home wage in America today in terms of real purchasing power is less by nearly half of what it was in 1967. And they don't let you realize as much. So over this past decade, the wages of the United States factory operatives fell to below that of their counterparts in Japan and nearly all industrialized nations of Europe and save Great Britain. So this will help to have even cheaper labor replacing the already hurting factory workers. Well, who knows, for when the free trade is operational, there won't be factories. At any rate, for industry will move into the free trade nations where labor is already cheaper. Danger. Now, with the official unemployment rates at an 8-year high, which includes mostly the ones losing their jobs only within the past year or two or less, the danger of such plans resurfacing in the United States is spectacularly increased. This is especially so given the proclivities of the administration and the president personally. And it might interest you to know that when Bush was a congressman from Texas, he was instrumental in early efforts to introduce the Nazi labor schemes into the United States via sponsorship of a measure to link welfare to birth control and overtly racialist propaganda about Negro intelligence. So what about unemployment and welfare? Well, the number of people that are receiving unemployment benefits over the last year jumped by 1 million over the previous year to 3.475 million, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics count. And don't bother with accuracy of count, for the low count is bad enough, but even more shocking was the weekly increase of recipients by 150,000 to 200,000 of new applicants who qualified for benefits, when a maximum increase of such 20,000 was expected. This indicates that the applicants are exhausting their reserves and they're finding no employment. Dear ones, the actual number of unemployed is into the tens of millions and rising like a flood tide. So in the known statistics are ones already written off as drug addicts, the shiftless, the homeless, and the criminals. So they're classified by the economists as the hardcore or structurally unemployed. Now, some were simply written out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics official count decades past. So also uncounted by documentation are the many millions of people that are needing full-time employment to maintain their family's living standard, but only able to obtain work on a part-time or erratic basis. And of these, the only ones counted are those who recently lost full-time jobs. In the past couple of months, this number has increased by some 650,000, according to your official count. Another most uncounted category is the discouraged worker. Only the recently discouraged are counted, and their ranks have swollen by at least 25% in just this last year. If you remain unable to find a job, you'll be dropped from the BLS official unemployment statistics. Unqualified to lose your job. But even many of those unemployed whose existence is conceded are not collecting benefits. And according to a recent study by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, only 37% of the official unemployed received unemployment benefits in 1990. Wow, less in some states. Now, only some 23% of unemployed Texans, for instance, got benefits. And the national figures are a record low for percentage, reports the study, and contrast sharply with a mere decade and a half past, when some 75% of the unemployed received compensation. So this is due to the draining of state unemployment funds and the imposition of more stringent eligibility requirements or standards and shortened benefit periods. So when the federal government began charging interest to states that run deficits in their unemployment trust funds from that good old central banking system of your so-called Federal Reserve, states restricted the benefits to reduce the likelihood that they would have to borrow. Nationally, your economy entered the current recession with a far weaker unemployment compensation system than at any other time since the end of World War II. And that is admitted as factual even by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which continually lies to suit the needs of the bankers. And the increase in official unemployment is, of course, due to a broad collapse in most economic sectors led by manufacturing and construction and wholesale and retail trade. So another 90,000 manufacturing jobs were lost in March from the prior month of 150,000. Dear ones, in less than a year, you have officially lost over 1.2 million manufacturing jobs alone. Now this back in 1990. 70,000 constructions jobs are gone, in addition to the 110,000 accounting from February. Now this could go on, but I shall bring it to a close, for I think that you get the point. You had best pay attention, because if your nation instigates such a plan, you are doomed. And as an economy, and that's exactly that which they are working as diligently as possible to accomplish. Now, I request that if Sananda's messages regarding sick fare have not been recently sent as express material, please add it to this document. If you can see the errors of the systems which have grown up around you, then you can better see how to restructure. And I believe it must become obvious that it cannot go on as it is. There is great and awful tribulation ahead as it is running. So will it be better if we all change? Well, yes, but not at first. They're out to break your backs. At any rate, so unity and restructuring are your only meaningful actions. Well, but the ceasefire comes and the boys come back. Back to what? A bunch of closed bases? I think you must know that you no longer need the bases, because you won't have your boys come marching home again. And the ceasefire conditions of the UN, US, and allies only clearly present what the Bush New World Order is all about: forced compliance of all nations unto the control of the elite. And you are simply imposing colonialism on the entire third world. Nations which reject the new imperial order will be subject to genocidal wars and externally imposed mass starvation, so hearken up. Now the conditions demanded in Resolution 687 usurp sovereign powers properly retained by the government of Iraq and arrogate them to the UN. Now these include the right to set debt repayment policy and economic development security or policy. Now, the right to engage in bilateral negotiations on boundary disputes without external interference, and the right of the state to maintain sole control over its oil fields and related natural resources. Ah, you say, but this is the UN. Well, yes, indeed. And who is the UN? The Khazar-run elite one world government run by the world elite bankers. So the resolution is fully intended to be a model for future demands and against other third world countries, especially Brazil and Argentina, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Indonesia, and many others too numerous to mention, which, like Iraq, have significant development potential and require bank funds for development or even survival, for that matter. Now next, it fully includes all of you in the new third world reduced to slavery to the elite. The Soviet ambassador Yuli Urosov called the ceasefire terms a serious warning to all those who might want to commit aggression. These facts are: it is an elite American resolution designed to impose direct hegemony. Now, the resolution is fully intended to be a model for future demands against other third world countries, especially Brazil and Argentina, India and Pakistan, Nigeria and Indonesia, and many others that are too numerous to mention, which, like Iraq, have significant development potential and require bank funds for development, for even survival, for that matter. So next, it fully includes all of you in the new third world, reduced to slavery to the elite. Now, the Soviet ambassador Yuli Urosov called the ceasefire terms a serious warning to all those who might want to commit aggression. Now, the facts are, it is an elite American resolution designed to impose direct hedge money on the region and control the world's resources and, well, dear ones, please, I simply do not wish to take the time to spell the regulations out for you, for they have been published. The restrictions, suffice it to say, are written so that there is no earthly way in which the requirements can be met by any nation, much less one just subjected to total genocidal destruction, as the U.S. just perpetrated on Iraq. And worse, Iraq was just a trial balloon to measure that which can be done everywhere. Change of bad news. Now, before I close, I wish to thank you, readers, for becoming ever so much observant. And I would like to share some notations sent to me from one CJM who wishes to share in case the readers have missed the news. Number 1, confessions by coercion by the police are now allowed. A pillar of the U.S. constitutional law is shot down. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 to allow coerced confessions in court as evidence. And coerced admission of guilt by police officers will be allowed in criminal courts if it proves to be a harmless error. Harmless error? And number 2, Ronald Reagan supports gun control and is using the assassination attempt and the Brady's injuries to remind people that they should not have guns, conjuring up this image of the assassination in the minds of people makes it easier to compel confiscation of guns. And number 3, Mr. Friedman, president of NBC, was interviewed last week, and he said there will be no more, and there is no more news coverage like in the old days of the 1980s, etc., and before. It's too costly. Our job is to collect, edit, explain, and project. By the way, how many are aware that NBC is owned and operated by General Electric? GE, in turn, is one of the first great corporations to begin to shift major operations into cheap labor locations in the East Bloc and elsewhere. And just a point or two to ponder as you go about your golf rounds or during ball game breaks. How long will you be able to afford the can of light, brothers? You had best be seeking the other kind of light. So Dharma, it's time for you to leave, Chela. And you ones need to pick up the supplies for the cement pour of early next week. And for you readers, one of the only things that Dharma has requested in return for her work is a safe shelter for her family underground. So there is a piece of remarkable construction going on in the village by her son, who is building contractor. And then with careful planning and construction requirements, we are progressing with very impressive structuring, the quality and standards of which shock the local architects and inspectors. And we are requiring steel support of industrial size and ample cement coverage to cover for full radiation security. Funny thing, Dharma cares not a whit about bombs. But she needs security from the ones who continually attempt upon her life. Well, Chelas, God did not say it would be easy. He only promised that truth would prevail. So as we move along, we have a new integrated substance which will produce the equivalent of security of 10 feet of dirt, or 3 feet of cement, into 1 foot of rather lightweight material, so stay tuned. And we will try to keep you an update. May you walk in beauty and enjoy that which abounds about you, for it does. After all, cause the journey to be one of glory, and not a dreary trail of sorrow. The sorrow and fear go with the understanding of truth. So we invite all who will to come within, for we have prepared a place. Salut. Hat on to clear. You have a nice and safe weekend. Love you. See you. Bye.